I'd like to introduce Sarah Clark. Sarah is our most, how do I put this delicately? She has
Longest serving,
the
longest
longest
serving.
tenure as a um, master gardener in our program, and we're thrilled that she has decided to spend so much time with us and can continue to share her expertise and experiences with us. So we value her.
Okay, here's what we're going to talk about today. And I number them so you can keep track of where we are if you're losing patience with me. I tend to spend a little bit of time on one of these, but why on earth would you want to grow vegetables? And just a second, move this over. What about our climate and when to start your vegetable gardening? And then where to grow your vegetables. What's a good spot once you've decided you are going to do it? Okay, where are you going to do it? And how are you going to prepare the soil so that you're getting ready to do it? And then what are you going to put in the soil? What varieties do you choose? And you can see there's a million varieties of just about anything you can imagine. What about seeds versus transplants? Is there a better or worse thought on that? And there definitely is. So that's good to know. What about the tools? What do you think you might need? What do you need to borrow from your neighbor? Or what do you start keeping an eye out at garage sales for? And then irrigation and harvesting and preserving the harvesting. So that's all about, how do you keep it alive and growing? And how do you, then of course, the harvesting, and then what are you going to do with it when you're done? So let's go straight to the point. Why would you want to grow vegetables? A garden can supply you with fresh, healthy vegetables. Yay. It can beautify your landscape because it's interesting to look at. Many of these things are. Happiness. You can reduce the transportation of food because you're growing it where you live, and that gets rid of the exhaust and the pollution from the transportation. You can minimize purchasing fertilizers because you would be using compost and recycling things into your garden, and it allows you to enjoy some varieties you just can't get in stores. And also, it keeps you active, very, very active and fit, and it improves your mind, and it gives you opportunities to be generous to your neighbors. And this sign says, "Someone take this zucchini, please." And you can see how big that is. So, but wait. What about saving money? No one talked to us about saving money with gardening. So technically, it should be a money-saving adventure. You get a few seeds, you get some water, some time, and what do you get? 50 broccoli plants for pennies each. So yes, they might be cheap, but you may not be able to use everything you grow. So, you have to
For calling
balance.
Nautical Sewing Centers, this is Maggie. How can we help you today?
I don't know. How can you help me? Anyway, so it can be cheap and you can produce a lot for much less than you could pay in the store. But you need to keep some things in mind. So some of the ways that you may not save money are you may buy too many seeds or plants, totally guilty. You may grow too much to use and it goes to waste. You may spend too much just buying all this equipment that you maybe don't even need. Or you just might try to do too much. And it really it just gets completely overwhelming. And of course, I have done that too. Okay, but the good news, you can save money. It may be in ways you don't think of, though. You can look for cheaper sources of seeds and equipment. You could share seeds with people. There's a seed sharing library at the library. There's a sheet. I'm going to say this straight. There is a seed sharing library at the public library in Longview, and you can go and use some of their seeds and then give the packet back for the next person. So that's possible. And you're getting top quality vegetables for less. So sometimes when you go to the grocery store, what you're looking at has been shipped from very far away, and yet you're getting, Whole Foods Market, as organic as you can grow it kind of food. Okay, you get fresh air and exercise. I've done this. That's not me, but I've done that. And other benefits, often for free. And of course, the more you learn, the better your practices, the less you have waste, the better you are able to save money in the process. And like once you have some equipment or a raised bed, that's a one-time expense and it can serve you for years. So there's ways to stretch the cost out. Okay, but just please don't get carried away. All right. That's an actual picture. I don't want to ever be that person. And full disclosure, anything involving this can be addicting because you say, who are we? Gardeners. What do we want? All the plants. Where will we put them? We don't know. So watch out when you go to the grocery store or the Home Depot or someplace and you see that plant, you think, do I have a place for this? Are you sure? Anyway, so there's that. Okay, so step 2. You've decided you're going to be a vegetable gardener. You are going to watch out for ways to not waste money. And so then you need to think about your climate and when to plant. When would you actually plant? So our Pacific Northwest climate is mild winters that are wet and hot, dry summers, much drier than you think. And unless it's not normal, because in April of 2022, it was like this. Of course, this was at about 800 feet. It's at my friend's house, but it was in April just a couple years ago. And then there was that heat dome in June of 2021. So, pay attention. So one of the ways that you can figure out what to do in your particular area is to use maps like this. There's many available online. This one describes days how many days are frost free. So interestingly, I know we sometimes have people from Moses Lake, and this line up here, this is about where Moses Lake is. And it has less, even though we think of Moses Lake as being a very hot place sometimes, it is less than 90 days of frost-free gardening time. Whereas this green area here is about 151 to 180. And out on the beach and the coastlines, it's over 180. So even though we tend to think of the beach area as being harder to garden because there's maybe more clouds and less sun, it actually has a longer season. When can you be pretty sure that what you plant or transplant out is not going to be frozen? You would go with the last killing spring frost, and in our area, it says April 16 to May 1st. And a lot of people want to get out there in April, early April, and start planting things. And you can, but you need to plant things that are able to survive a light frost. So keep that in mind, or be willing that maybe this year you lose things and you have to start over, but you like gamble and win that you're going to make it with more plants. Okay, what is your microclimate? Would you be planting on tax day, April 15th, on May Day, May 1st, on June 1st, because you live way up in the higher elevations? That's how you decide. You decide the earliest date you can plant. But another way to look at it is how cold is it, like right at the ground. So here's April 6th of 2022. It was frozen enough that my friends in the neighborhood, they put out dishes of water for dogs, and this one was frozen enough to pick it up, not just a little crust. On the other end of the season, you have to grow things that will ripen and be out of the garden before they freeze. So this chart shows you when is your first killing frost, not just a little bit of a coldness, but a killing frost. It's like you come out and everything's dead and in the ground. In the green area we have, it's about the middle of October to November 1st, All Saints Day, if you think of it that way. Some areas like over here, depending on where you live, it might be before September 1st. So it depends on where you are. And you can look these up online. So one of the key things that nobody really taught me about when they were talking about these charts is that the soil itself will tell you when you are ready to start planting. And crops that need the soil itself to be 50 degrees before you put the seed in the ground. Here are some of those, and you can read them here, like if you were doing even transplanting tomatoes or squashes or things like that. And it turns out that you don't have to buy a fancy soil thermometer. You could go to a Fred Meyer's or someplace like that and just buy one of those instant read thermometers and just put it in the ground, and it doesn't know that you are not stabbing it into food. It just thinks, okay, I'll tell you what the temperature is. So you get to have mine cost me $10. And if you go out and you stab it in the ground and it says 45 degrees, don't be planting things that really want to be warm. So getting a soil thermometer, if you learn nothing else from this talk, that's the key idea. That's a really great tip. Okay, but things that can handle cooler temperatures, and my eye instantly jumps down here to rhubarb because I separated mine. And a shameless plug for free rhubarb. If you want some free rhubarb and you live close enough to come to me and get it, I have about 5 starts. They multiply and they love it here. So, and it's the red, I forget what they call it, strawberry rhubarb. But you see, these, look at what they tend to be. They're the kind of things that it's hard to get your kid to eat, like cabbage, cauliflower, chard, collards, lettuces. You could probably get them to kale. Do they like kale? Horseradish? So these are ones that can handle it cooler. So in general, when should you plant your personal garden? April 15, if there's no chance of frost, you're willing to risk it, you're planting cold tolerant plants. May 1st, if you want to be on the safer side, and for some folks, it's going to be June 1st because maybe your soil needs to dry out, or maybe you are living at a higher elevation. Quick comment on when's the best time to take the soil temps. You could take it several times a day, but I would take it in the morning because the plant is going to be there in the morning. So if you take it in the afternoon and that's the only time you take it, the soil might be warm then, but in the evening, it might be colder. Okay, and maybe you're not fond of broccoli. So, okay, how can you cheat this system? One way is to grow transplants. And you can also, that gives you a chance to grow those things in one place, and then when it's warmer outside, you move already grown plants into those spots. So that's an excellent idea. You can use plastic tunnels, which is a way of artificially heating up the soil. And my one advice to you is make sure you're not cooking your plants. I have done this and come out and everything is nicely cooked cabbage because it was too hot. So make sure there's air circulation, keep checking the temperature, and make sure you're not cooking them. There's another way to cover them that doesn't require so much attention, which is called floating row covers. And this is a spun material somewhat like dryer sheets, only on a big scale. If you come to our plant sale, we sell it for a ridiculously low price. So, and you lay this over it and it raises it about 4 to 5 degrees. It also keeps bugs off. So, okay, you're ready. You've decided you're going to do your gardening. You've decided that you have a clue when you kind of have a calendar going. You need to start things either inside or outside. So when you're planning your garden, where should it be? Could it be, close to my house, far to my house? Where would be a good location? So things to consider. Well, what is it you want to grow, and what do those things need? So if you're growing broccoli, they can handle a little more shade and coldness. And do you like broccoli? Because it's really nice to grow here, by the way. Sun exposure, very, very important. Almost always direct sun. So if you're squeezed in between 2 giant rows of fir trees and the only sun they get is exactly at noon, you may want a different location. The space. How much space does each thing need? Corn and carrots is a good example. The corn needs 30 to 36 inches between rows. And I often have tried to squish it closer. It really doesn't like it. And carrots, though, you could grow a lot more carrots in the same spot because they just need to be a few inches apart. So that will make a difference with what you're going to do. And your location, it's best where you can get to it every day and have a clue what's going on. And then, of course, near water. For several years, the water system in my backyard had a leak in it, and we had to run a hose from my house 300 feet to my garden and come back and forth to turn it on and off. We fixed it finally, but water is important. Okay, another thing to think about is the actual soil that you're planting in and how well does it drain. And you don't want a garden where this person is, where you can float a boat next to your garden, unless you're growing water lilies. So what kind of structure should you use? Okay, so you're thinking about, is it draining? And then what do I want it to look like on the edges, basically? Do you want a raised bed? It's quite raised, so it's quite up. It's next to less bending over. It's next to your waist or knees at least. Do you want to put it in the ground in just rows? Do you want, what's your thinking on that? Each has great advantages. Okay, what about convenience? Are you going to garden at a community garden that's 7 miles away? Or is there somewhere closer? Are you going to be able to get to it? What about the costs involved? These raised beds aren't cheap, but once you've bought them, you have them for quite a while. Okay. Yes, always the costs. Okay. When you're thinking about what you want to grow, how much are you willing to eat? My mom and I were planting starts for broccoli. And really, one broccoli plant will put on the main head, but then it puts on all these side shoots. So once you get past about 3 or 4 broccoli plants, you're getting really overwhelmed, but it's so tempting to plant more. What are your plans for the food? What are you going to do if you grow too much? Are you going to just eat it fresh as fast as you can? Are you going to be canning it? Are you going to freeze it? Are you going to dry it? And how much space do you have for growing different plants? If each one takes a certain amount of space and your garden is only so big, there's never enough space. I'm just going to tell you. What are the watering needs? And is it possible to successfully grow it here? You're going to grow watermelon. You have to go through a lot to get it to ripen, and you have to grow the right kinds that grow well here. Sometimes you have to assist them with some sort of greenhousey kind of thing. Other people put special plastic mulches down that reflect heat up or down. So what will it take to successfully grow it? I would suggest that you don't try to grow bananas. You could grow a banana tree, but if you're thinking of the bananas ever being bananas, I regret to tell you that it's very difficult. Okay, question. Where do you have the best sun? Because most vegetable crops require up to 6 hours, more than 6 hours, but at least 6 hours of direct sunlight. And what if you just have nothing but shade? Well, then you need to move. Or you can move your garden. There are community gardens. I just heard of another one happening right near Mount Solo. I think it's on the other side of Mount Solo. I think it's on the riverside. You can try gardening in a neighbor's yard. You can garden at a friend's house. You can garden at an enemy's house. Hey, you might become friends. So how much space do you need? Well, you can never have enough, but you need to consider what each plant actually needs. So read the seed packet and believe the seed packet. So yes, you could try to grow onions within an inch of each other, but each little onion is going to be like shoving the other one and trying to overcome. And corn needs tons of space, but carrots need less. And you can sometimes get very compact varieties. For instance, there's some squash that puts out squash vines that go for 10 or 12 feet. And then there's squash that stay a bush and put all of their fruit on right there at the place where you planted it. But the most important thing is to remember the roots. I'm always seeing people try to plant a tomato in a fairly small bucket, and the tomato is going to grow 3-4 feet. The roots are pretty much the same size as the plant. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. You know, if am I going to try to squish something really big into something that really can't handle it? So, what is your soil and drainage like? Because vegetables require fertile, well-drained soil. Moist, but not a swamp. Is it too wet? That is our number one problem out here. Consider raised beds. Mine are 6-inch tall pieces of wood, and the soil is slightly mounded in them, and that is enough. Even though I live on the river level, I'm like, my elevation is 11. So consider raised beds or containers if that's an issue for you. If it's not easy to dig, you try working in compost, organic matter. Come to the leaf exchange in November and get bags and bags of leaves and put them on your garden and work them in. Are you worried about contamination in your soil because you don't know the history and you're suspicious maybe somebody was changing car oil in this spot or something like that? Then you would need to get your soil tested professionally. And there's several ways to test your soil. If you're just interested in the pH level, which is the acidity in your soil, these little kits work really well, and you get to feel like a mad scientist and cackle and pour these little tubes and shake. Oh, it's great. They pretty much just tell you your nitrogen level, your phosphorus level, and your potassium. That's the NPK numbers on your fertilizer bag. And if you're more interested in having someone else do it, or you have complicated questions, you should probably get it tested professionally. And we, for a long time, have been very happy with Simply Soil Testing, which you can look up. Probably these prices have gone up, but you can pay for any one of these options, including toxic metal testing. So maybe that's one of your options. So, I mean, that's just an example of an option. There's other soil testing companies out there, of course, but this is just an example. Okay, commonly we say that nitrogen is for the green part and for, the part that's growing up, and the phosphorus is a little bit more interested in helping the roots, or the part that grows down, and the potassium is just an all-around thing. But of course, chemicals don't really work this way. But oftentimes plants will come with instructions to say this one needs more nitrogen. So that's an interesting question. You need the higher N number, which is always first to be. That would be higher. So if it's 2000, that's only nitrogen. And if it's the higher number in the middle. In fact, I went to the store 2 days ago. I was trying to grow something, and it was onions. It said they want a higher number in the middle, like twice as much of phosphorus. I couldn't find one. So I had to look up what phosphorus came from and see if I had some bags of whatever that was in my greenhouse, which I think it's bone meal. So I was like, oh, I have bone meal. Okay, great. So I managed to kind of fake it. Sometimes they don't sell exactly what you think you need. But if you ever wondered what those stood for, that's what that is. Okay. A note about planting. No matter what form your garden takes, you should not plant the same plants in the same spot every year. And this is where I throw my brother Scott under the bus, because he planted his green beans in exactly the same place, in the same soil, for 40 years. And as the time went on, they started just doing terribly. Well, part of that was because he was using up the same nutrients that they liked. And part of it was that any diseases that were around had a good chance to multiply right there. So don't do that. Move them around. Try different, and don't plant the same kind of plant in the same place. So if you planted bush beans, don't plant pole beans, because they're both beans. So move things around and have a plan. So rotation of crops, it stops diseases, it helps pests not build up in the soil. It's just a good practice. Okay, so, well, how would you know how to, what follows what? I kind of like to start with this yellow square where it's the fruit. The fruit, some sort of that puts out a fruit is taking like more out of the soil to put that on. And then the next one to the left is the root. It's packing storage stuff down into a root. That's not as much as a fruit, but it seems like it takes more energy. And then the leaf is just you're eating just the leaves. That seems to take the least amount of energy. And then a legume is like a bean product or a pea product, and they put nitrogen back in the soil. So that's why you want to follow the heaviest feeders after a pea or a bean or something like that. So does it really, really matter though? Not a whole lot. Just move things around and don't plant them in the same. Or you can look for many things like this online, by the way. And there's lots of garden programs that will help you. They'll even track you can make a map of your garden and they'll remember from year to year. I have one that glows very dark pink if it was there last year, and then if it was like 5 years ago, that's just faint pink in that spot that says, hey, maybe you shouldn't plant that here. I just use it as much, I take it with a grain of salt. Okay, so your garden structure choices. Your number one choice might be rototilling. You just have a chunk of ground, you rototill it up. You don't have to build beds. You're just going to plant it right in the soil. So the positive, you don't have to build the beds. You can grind in your compost so it gets mixed in the soil. That's sometimes a good thing. You can change the configuration every year. You can change the direction of your garden or the rows, and you're not limited. The negative is you have to either rent or buy the tiller or borrow it. And it also breaks down the soil structure. So the soil likes to develop all these little air pockets and stuff, and then you come in with this tiller that just chews it up. And the ground may be too wet, which is our number one problem. And it takes time and energy, and it pollutes the air. There's that. Okay, garden structure number 2 is just containers. The bigger is better because of those roots. You can control the soil. It must have drainage. You might think of water damage coming out of the bottom of the pot, so don't put it on something you care that's going to get wet. You can put it in your driveway. You can put it on decks and anywhere. And the water reservoirs are crucial. You need some way to hold water that it can draw the water up from. So there you can put it in these dishes, or sometimes they have a little water reservoir in the bottom of the pot. It really is important for big pots like that. What about raised beds? Very popular. They are a good investment. They can last for years. They can solve your drainage issues because they're up above everything can drain down. You can still control your soil and your fertility. And you actually could move or remove them, but most of us don't. And the negative is there's some cost involved in it. Okay, so some plants don't work well in raised beds. I've seen them raised in raised beds. Corn, you try to squish in a 4-foot bed, you try to squish 3 rows because they like to grow, or it's kind of hard sometimes. So, but it does need a little bit of construction skills, usually, or some handy friends. And here's some raised bed options. Here's the purchased kind that actually is off the ground. Then there's these boxes that you build and the soil is in them and they're right on the ground. Or this is what I have. I just have basically framed areas that has the soil a little higher. And some people put cement or other materials around them. And then don't forget there is another way to do raised beds. I have friends who do these kind of waves in their garden. They have these raised mounds and then they plant in them and there's no structure. And they put chips down so they're not walking in the mud. And this is a very, very good way to do raised beds with very little cost. Just a lot of moving dirt, basically, piling things up. Okay, there's another way to make raised beds called hugel culture. We have one in our demo garden at the fairgrounds, and it involves starting with basically logs and branches and then piling other materials up in a mound and then putting the topsoil on the top and planting into it. And as it decomposes, the soil gets nutrients and it also kind of heats up a little. So that's nice. That's wonderful. You should look into that. Okay, looking at the costs. Rototill, you don't have any construction costs, but you have to do to get a hold of a rototiller, and there's some time. The raised beds, they last for years, but just mounding dirt could be an option too. So maybe very little cost there. And pots and bags, you could have them be cheap or expensive, but they don't last as long as raised beds. Okay, what about convenience? The number one thing, it must be easy to get to and near water. Having tools and supplies nearby is also good, but you can always just haul things out there. Question on the pine cones. We'll get back to that. My gut reaction is on the answer to that, Dan, is he's asking, can you use any filler like pine cones or pine needles in the base of the raised bed? Those, I think, are pretty acid, but if you don't use too much of them, and if the raised bed's quite deep, I don't think it would matter. But that's just that. Okay, what's your comfort level? If you don't want to be crawling around on the ground, you better not put your garden on the ground. You'd want to raise it up. Some people, you don't want to, yeah, no, be that. Tilling. Can it be done by rototiller? I have a little Mantis rototiller, and I can put it in my raised bed, and I can grind back and forth on the raised bed with my tiller. So that has been very useful to me. You can till with a shovel. I've done that. You can, you need to add organic matter every year, and how I do that is I pile it on top, and then I just, as I'm kind of working the soil to make a row or plant something, I just kind of turn some under, and eventually it cooks down and gets in there. You can compost off to the side and then add your compost when it's finished into the garden. Worm composting I do a great deal of. I am way beyond the little box in the kitchen. I use giant garbage cans, and we pile layers of stuff up, and then we let it cook down as we start a new one, and we fill up 2 or 3 of those, and as one of them gets done, it gets emptied and started over. If you're interested in that, send me an email. I'll try to put that in there. Okay. Sheet mulching is kind of more what I do. You have layers of grass and leaves on top, and they cook together in a sheet on top of the soil and eventually get worked into the soil. It also keeps the weeds down. And you could just go out and buy compost and other amendments. That can help. And if you're curious, you could test your soil. You could do the little test, or you can have it professionally tested. So, we're up to 5, but the good news is they get faster. So, things to consider. Does it grow well here, wherever here is for you? That's probably our number one thing. Will it fit your space?
Check.
What are your maturity dates? If they take 160 days to mature, you want to watch out for that. So tomatoes, you tend to count those from transplanting. They're always transplanted for us. If you try to grow a tomato from seed, it's not going to get ripe enough in enough time. So you start it in some sort of a situation where it can be nice and warm, and then when you transplant it, you count from there. In our area, I'm always looking for like the 70 to 90, no more than 100 days. Some of those nice old-fashioned kind are well over 100 days. It's very challenging for them to get ripe, for me anyway. So I think a 60 is good and 110 is going to give me green tomatoes. For you, it may not be that way, because even though you maybe have a shorter season, it might be much warmer for you. So that can affect it. So does your object that you're planting need some kind of support? I would suggest, if so, put the support in first and then plant it. Don't plant the pole beans and then try to climb through the tangle of pole beans and stick the support in around them. I don't know who did that. Probably me. And is it determinate or not? So tomatoes, if you buy determinate tomatoes, they quickly set tomatoes and ripen them and they're done. Indeterminate, they say you want to do a lot of canning. They keep putting on ripe tomatoes and putting on ripe tomatoes all summer long until the frost kills them. So decide on what you want. Do you want them just one and done and then put something else in, or are you interested in never ending? And I don't know, does it sound good to eat? You can have me tell me that okra is wonderful to grow here, and I will be so glad for you, but I dislike okra, so I am not going to eat that. And I'm old enough to say I don't have to eat that. Okay, one of the key helpers for starting a garden is the seed packet. And you will notice that it says, let's see, this one is a cucumber. It's a straight 8 cucumber, which is very popular. You can use it in the small stages for pickling. It has the little map, which we're not real fond of this map because the orange goes all the way to Florida. I don't know if I put that in. Yeah, pay attention to suggestions. This map, Washington is the same as Florida. So it may have some technical temperature similarities, but I don't know. I don't think so. Okay. Will it be ready to harvest before your first freeze? If it's 58 days and you can figure that out because you know when your first freeze might be, that's good to know. If it says 120 and you don't have 120, then you've got issues. Okay. So what's better? Should I plant from seed, or should I go buy transplants, or should I try to raise transplants? Seeds are cheaper, lots cheaper. The key is to buy seeds for your area. In our Pacific Northwest area, we have Territorial, we have Ed Hume, we have many other kinds that are, but they're specific for this area because we have a short season, but it does get hot in the middle and dry. It's kind of odd. Okay, fresh seeds are better. I personally have a problem. I keep trying to plant old seeds. Can you use old seeds? Yes. If you store the seeds well, they will stay for years. You can make sure they're totally dry, seal them in a jar, and put them in your freezer, and they will stay a long time. There's frozen seeds in the Arctic range on the planet Earth that are being saved for the future. Unfortunately, with climate change, they seem to be melting, but that if that's how they save seeds, we should do the same. My personal seeds, I've been storing them on top of my dryer, so I think I'm really failing at that one. A dark, cool place would be better. So, but expect lower germination if your seeds are older. You can take some and put them in a damp paper towel, like 5 of them, and see how many of them sprout. And if half of them sprout, then that's probably good. Just sow twice as many. Okay. I'm throwing my brother under the bus again. My brother tends to take a pinch of seeds and go like this down the row. And this is what his lettuce looks like. And each of those is an individual plant that wants to be as big a foot around. It's better to spread your little starts out in some way. If you can get it from seed and space them out, that would be better. And if you don't, then thinning is your friend because it really won't do well. It looks fun, but it doesn't do well. Okay, how can you plant less seeds instead of just dumping them on the ground? You can use the packet and tap them out. You could try to take your fingers and sprinkle them in thinly. You will need to thin the plants, usually, just expect that. You can buy pelleted seed, which has a little bit of clay on it, and that way you can put the individual tiny seeds where you want them. Not all seeds come that way, though. You can use a seed guide with holes, and I have a picture of that in a minute, or you can make your own seed tape. You take either toilet paper or a thin piece of newspaper, and you put a little bit of like thinned out glue or flour and water in little dots, and you put the seeds in those spots, and then you fold the little paper up and you lay it in the soil, and the paper melts away and the seeds are right where they need to be. That's the goal. These seed guides, you see, you can choose where to put each seed, and you can either put it in the hole or you just mark where it goes. And here's an example of homemade seed tape, which was great. I did it. I'm here to tell you it's a fabulous idea. I'm also here to tell you that the robins love to rip those out of the ground. So I think if I was going to do that again, I'd lay some bird netting over the bed or something, because when they worked, they were beautiful. And when the robins got at them, it was terrible. Okay, how deep do you plant your seeds? Look at the packet. Usually, now here's a kind of a joke, 2 times the diameter of the seed, or 4 times the narrowest dimension, or 2 to 3 times the largest dimension, or what? Here's the key. Big seeds, bigger hole. Small seeds, plant them shallower. Okay, what about transplants? If you've been planting, if you have plants that have been growing somewhere else, you get a jump of several weeks on your growing. And they can help you grow varieties that would normally take longer to ripen if you didn't have someone else grow them for you, like in a greenhouse. But they can cost more, which is too bad. But you get instant gratification because you go out there, you put the plants in, and oh, look at that. The garden's already up. And first you get a plant, then you get another plant. Then we say no more plants. But then we find another plant and we say get 2 more plants. I mean, it is craziness. So watch your craziness level on getting too many plants. Okay, here's some basics on the tools. A hoe, a rake, a shovel, and a hand tool. And pretty much you could do almost everything with these. And this hand tool is my favorite. And they come in all different kinds. This one is a plastic handle. I think that's actually a picture of my hand tool. But you can see it's not a lot. You don't have to invest a lot. Of course, gloves, don't forget them. Okay, irrigation. What about watering? This is our rainfall in the middle of the summer. We get less rain than Tucson, Arizona in the middle of the summer. So what do? You got to water. And we had that heat dome. So you want to avoid overhead watering because you're getting the water on the leaves, which could cause funguses, and you're wasting water. A lot of it's going where you don't want it. You want to, if you hand water, you need to use some kind of a wand or something so you're putting the water where it goes and you can shut it off between plants. You can use drip irrigation. We're having a drip irrigation talk very soon with an expert on this, so I really suggest you go to that. And in general, stick your finger in and see if it needs watering. If you keep your plants evenly moist and not dried out, you're going to have a much more successful garden. Okay, oh my goodness. We figured out where to plant it. We figured out what structure to put it in. We chose our seeds or plants. We planted it. We carefully watered it. We grew things. It's awesome. How do we know when it's ripe? Well, some plants don't hold well. Tomatoes, when they're ripe, and when they're overripe, it's bad. So watch out for that. Cabbage can crack. You watch it, one day it looks good, the next day it's split open. So kind of pay attention to the different plants. Basil tends to go to seed. You can pick off those flowers as quick as you see them, and you can keep having basil. And corn, once it's ripe, and there's no help if you don't pick it at the right time. Onions, they fall over and dry off, so you don't have to worry about them too much. Carrots can even be left over winter. We do get a kind of a worm bug. It's a little drilling, can't think of the name. I'm sure someone's going to tell me. It goes through the carrot and it ruins them. So I personally pull mine off, break the tops off, and layer them in dry planting soil and cover them with a black plastic bag and keep them on my carport. And that way the bugs don't get them and they stay cold enough and I can have hundreds of carrots in storage. Okay, what do you do with them? Preserving. By the way, do you can in a jar your vegetables? Keep that in mind because it's coming up in a minute. Refrigeration doesn't always work. It's not for the long term. Drying things, only if you really like things that are very dry and shriveled up. Freezing can work, but it has a limit, about a year. And canning requires equipment, storage, and knowledge. So you see this thing here? This is a pressure cooker. If you're going to can non-acid vegetables, you need to know what you're doing because if you don't, you could kill people. Okay, so avoid killing your dinner guests. Use a pressure gauge cooker and test the gauge if you have that kind and find out from somebody experienced with canning, like someone at Bob's or someplace like that, exactly how to do it. At the very least, get a book because this is the kind of stuff that people died from in the old days because they didn't can them correctly. You can't just water bath green beans. No, really, you can't. So